So we'll go ahead and start. All right, I kind of want to start this meeting by kind of talking about AutoCAD University, which I attended the first week of December, kind of share some of the insight and kind of news surrounding some of the software. The first thing that they dropped at Autodesk University is Autodesk is most likely going to be changing their subscription model, the way that we obtain our software licensing. If y'all remember, AutoCAD kind of started out at one platform. It's called AutoCAD. Now there's about 80 different products that Autodesk manufactures and resells. So, we particularly use Civil 3D. That's the platform that we most utilize here. There's about 80 different softwares. Well, now that we're all in the world of BIM and 3D modeling, we need to coordinate all of our models, and we need all of our different softwares to talk to one another. And that hasn't really been a great workflow for Autodesk. So the thing that they kind of emphasize is that they're going to try to bring it back in. Instead of having so many platforms that are so distinct and separate from one another, they want to bring it back into a more unified platform. And I think this subscription model is kind of their first step to do that. So no longer are we going to be purchasing a license for Civil 3D. It's going to be a license for Autodesk products, meaning you'll most likely have all software products available to you. There's not many details. They just kind of said, this is coming, just so, this is our big announcement. So all software, one price, more details to follow in this year. So just wanted to kind of talk about that. The way that they're designing the software is changing rather rapidly. Right now we tell the computer kind of what we want it to do. That's the way that the system and computer technology that we're utilizing works. Well, they're changing that. No longer are we going to tell the computer what we want it to do. We're going to tell the computer our ultimate goal, and then the computer is going to go through a process called generative design and go through a bunch of different iterations and give you the best results. So that's something to kind of think about. They did a couple demonstrations of that. Mostly that technology is great for like structural analysis, those types of things, where it's a hard science. A lot of what we do, there's some soft science to it. There's some artistry to it. So I haven't seen too many applications for actual Civil 3D in terms of that technology, but it's definitely there for the structural side of the business. Upcoming software, I attended a class kind of peering in under the hood of the future releases of the software, and so I wanted to just kind of briefly share some of that with you. I don't know if all the things that I saw are going to be incorporated in the next release, which is 2016, but they are definitely fully working in the version of the software that was demonstrated. So take that for what it means. The first thing that they demonstrated was revision clouds. They have greatly improved the technology to draw a revision cloud. No longer is it just a simple arc for each little revision cloud. If you wanted to change a revision cloud, it was such a hassle because it was made up of 20, 30, 40, 100 little arcs. They have intelligent grips to modify revision clouds now, so you can just kind of grip one, and the whole cloud will adjust to where you pull that one grip. So that's something exciting. There's new OSNAP variables in the newer releases. There's a snap to the center of a closed polygon, so you can find a center of mass. There's some other different things there. They're going to incorporate something called System Variable Monitor. AutoCAD has a couple hundred system variables. The newest release of the software will have a monitor that kind of analyzes what you use, what you change, how you like your AutoCAD customization, and it kind of remembers that and gives those to you in a better way. Dimensions greatly change in the new release. No longer do you type what dimension you're looking for, so you no longer type, dim lin or dim ang or anything, or dim aligned. All you have to do now is type dimension, and then it's smart enough to know what type of dimension you want based on the object type that you hover over. So they kind of streamline that. They've greatly improved dimensions in general. You can stretch a group of dimensions and have them all kind of line up automatically. You no longer have to manipulate individual grips of dimensions to get them to line up. You can also divide dimensions by a simple click. So you can take one long dimension and break it up into 3 or 4 dimensions. So they've greatly improved the dimension capabilities. One of the biggest things that I saw was just the general improvement of the software. It's a lot faster. They've rewritten the code yet again. But from what I saw, it was handling large data sets very well. One of the things that I was kind of impressed with is, if you have a lot of different objects on your screen, let's say a couple hundred objects, and you go to copy or move them, the minute you select all of them and you move your cursor to where you want them to be, it kind of takes a minute for all those objects to regen. And then you move your cursor again, and you got to wait again for it to regen. They've fixed that issue. In the release that they were demonstrating, you move it once, it will regen, but after that, it's a solid object, and you can move around as much as you want, and all of your copied or moved objects will go along with your cursor. They've also added a lot of command previews. So if you want to hatch something, it will actually show a preview of what the hatch is going to look like in your model space before you actually create the hatch. So you can tell if the scale is appropriate. They've done the same thing for the erase command. It will kind of gray out the objects that you've selected before hitting delete. Same with stretch, scale, and mirror. Those are all added commands that have previews associated with them. The overall quality of your line work within AutoCAD greatly improves. You don't really have some visual resolution issues like we currently do. They have something called quality of line work, which just gives a lot more detail. It resolves a lot of the issues with having to zoom in and out, and sometimes you have to regen to get your line work to kind of come back into focus. They've kind of fixed that. You just have this high quality line work. And just in general, better graphics, and that actually affects, it's to the point where it actually affects quality of the printing. That actually is your output. So just their basic line work and functionality has improved quite a bit. One of the things that they've been focusing on as a developer of all the software is coordinated models between the disciplines. And currently, the way that the software is kind of set up is we translate everything through Navisworks, back and forth through Navisworks, and it's a back and forth process. There's no dynamic qualities to the models. It all has to go and reprocess through Navisworks. They're going away from Navisworks. They're actually kind of taking it out of their product line. And they're going to be pushing AC360 and online collaboration instead of Navisworks, so that everything is uploaded to the cloud and accessed via the cloud. So everything's live. You bring it in directly into your drawings. There's no conversion. It's just this native talking to all the programs together. So in the new versions of AutoCAD, there's the BIM 360 tab. There's also BIM 360 Glue, which kind of updates all your consultant files on the fly. You can also XREF Naviswork files into your native AutoCAD. So that's kind of coordinated models. They're developing a lot of that. PDFs improve greatly in the newest release. They have a couple different options to publish to PDF and a couple preset qualities of your PDFs. And the good news is when you attach a PDF to your AutoCAD drawing, it no longer will behave as an image. It will behave more or less like line work and text. So there's some auto recognition there. It processes a lot better. Because that's one of the most infuriating things is dealing with images and TIFFs and PDFs. So they greatly increased the functionality of PDFs within AutoCAD. Also, one of the things that they did in regards to PDFs is you can create smart PDFs where your PDFs actually contain views for each page associated with it. So let's say you create a PDF of your plan sheet, send it to your client, but you want your client to see a certain thing in that page set. You want to direct them to a specific area, specific detail. You now have that capability to add that link within your PDF. The next cool thing is it will actually link to your sheet index on your title sheet too. So if you click, hey, let's go to sheet 43 out of the set, you just click on your sheet index and it will take you to that sheet. And they also made fonts and text searchable within the PDFs created from AutoCAD. So those are all kind of neat little things. Reality computing is kind of more or less talking about BIM and kind of real world live scans and how we coordinate our models. They finally have incorporated workflows for point clouds within AutoCAD. You can actually manipulate point clouds. You don't really need a third-party program to manipulate and do your constraints on point clouds. Software also can handle point clouds. Typically here, we try to open a point cloud in a couple minutes maybe. He did a demonstration on his software. He was using a laptop, so it's not this top-of-the-line, high computing workhorse, but he opened a 500 million point cloud for us, and the file opened in 15 seconds on his laptop. So they've greatly streamlined the code to handle point clouds, finally. They've also created a couple different things with point clouds and 3D computing. They've created something called section planes, which you can actually slice your object and give you details and sections of your 3D objects and point clouds. You also have snaps for point clouds. There's 3D edges, corner and center line of your point clouds. They've also increased the rendering capabilities of Civil 3D and AutoCAD. Rendering used to kind of just be something architects did. Well, they're kind of bringing that functionality into the Civil 3D side of the software. Probably one of the things that I would kind of emphasize to you is that there are a lot of software products out on the market, and we all kind of need to be on top of that, of what would work best into our workflow. One of the softwares that I think we need to particularly look at for a large segment of our business is Autodesk Utility Design. We do actually have 5 licenses for that software. I don't think anybody has it loaded on their machine, but it would be marked as, of course. But when we talk about, where is most of our work, a lot of our work is on the utility side of civil engineering, and we're not really utilizing software that was specifically developed and designed for utilities. So that's something that I'd like to kind of start to push here. So that's something I'm going to be trying to free up some time to look at too, is that specific software, and particularly for our substation work and underground electrical work. They've got some tools in there that are designed specifically for that. So that's all the kind of boring stuff with Autodesk University. There's a lot of things that I'll probably implement kind of in the background that you won't really see too much, but a couple things I'd like to talk about. Plotting to the SDP3, which is the Mylar or the HP 4500 color and Mylar. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's no need to actually unload the Mylar roll. You can actually have both rolls on the plotter. I've loaded some software configurations in it so that it knows which one to plot to. So just keep that in mind, that there's no need to unload the Mylar. There's also a couple new CTB files that you can plot to. This is mostly just for a couple people here in the room. That's always good. Hit a first command and not respond. It's called Xerox _88 30A. And what that CTP is for is it's going to be for SDGE distribution building 5. So it's really for our electrical line works. So these three here are added now, and you'll see them on everybody's machine. Just kind of know that that's what they're there for and that it's intentional. I want to talk a little bit about LISP routines. So if you type AP, that's app load, and this is where all the LISP routines reside. They're animated programming to do certain things within your drawings. So I've reorganized them a little bit. What you'll notice here on the top, so this is the default path for where all of our LISP routines are. It's on the Q drive, CAD lib, LISP 2013. What you'll notice is there's a folder now called _San Diego. So this is a folder that I've developed, and I've started to place all the LISP routines that I developed into this folder. So you can find all the ones that I'm currently have developed are shown here. So there's a couple that I wanted to highlight real quick. The first being page setup current. So we'll go ahead and load that guy. If you notice, on all my LISP routines, I will try to say, hey, type this command to run the LISP. So you'll always kind of see that on any routine that I write. So what does this LISP routine do? What this LISP routine does is it will pick whatever the layout, the page setup that you have associated with your current tab, and apply it to all the other tabs in your drawing. So for instance, this sheet is set up by 11 by 17. Probably could have picked a better drawing to do this on, but so this is an 11 by 17. Sheet 2 is set up to the OSE at a 24 by 36. And what you're experiencing here is kind of the typical delay associated with a viewport of a file that has a lot going on. This is probably the most intensive file that we're ever going to develop here outside of what Mark does. Because Mark's special. So this one's, as you can see, is an OSE. So we'll switch back to sheet 1. Hopefully it'll go a lot quicker, because hopefully I have it regened, but probably not.
You haven't seen Kim's recycling facility drawing.
So the LISP routine is page setup current. So click that. Now if I go back to sheet 1, or sheet 2, tab 2, it's now going to have applied that 11 by 17 page setup to that tab and any other tab that I had in this drawing. So this can be pretty helpful if you have, you know, eight tabs in your drawing and you don't want to go through and assign the page setup for all of them. So you can see my page setup now is now the 11 by 17 that was defined in layout tab 1.
So it propagates whichever tab you're in?
It propagates the current tab to all the other tabs in your drawing. So now sheet 2 is set up that way. So again, that was page setup current. I also wrote quick little LISP routines to take the page setups from the template and apply them to all the tabs in your drawing. These may be useful, may not be, just because these are set to palette A as your CTB. And, you know, what's the best palette to use? You know, everybody has their different preferences. Some are SDGE, some are TransIng. So just kind of keep that in mind if you do apply the template ones, that they're all palette A. So probably the best one is the page setup current, because just set up it once in your drawing and then apply it to all of the sheets in your drawing. Something else I wanted to cover is the startup suite within this AP appload command. You can add LISP routines here, and every time you open AutoCAD, those LISP routines will automatically load, and those commands will become native to your AutoCAD session. So you can add any LISP routine to this that you would like. I don't know if I really need to say more about that, but feel free to add those to your startup suite. It's kind of a way to help organize and manage all your different list routines so that you don't necessarily forget where they are, what they are, and what they do. You can add them to your startup suite to kind of help you know those commands a little bit better. Next list routine I wanted to show is a make line type. So it's line type make LT Lisp. So hopefully we've populated almost all of the line types that you need in your drawing within our AutoCAD line or our line type file. However, if you do need to create one, this is an easy list routine to create a line type rather than dealing with a text file and trying to figure out what means what. This is kind of just a list routine that kind of automates that for you a little bit. So you can, name it. Let's just name one real quick. Storm drain, text string, SD. All right, let's increase the dash length. Text height, let's go 0.1. Text gap, we'll leave that. Text style, we'll go simplex. Dash type, continuous. And then we'll just create the line type.
Isn't that really contradictory?
What?
Dash type continuous.
Dash type continuous.
Can you edit existing line type with that?
You can't. It would be nice.
So, sorry. So if you didn't like the spacing on this, the one that you just created, you have to create a new one?
Yes, I believe. I can verify that. No, please ask questions.
Where does it reside and can you pull it back up and change it in the text file?
It will get.
It resides in the drawing.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem with line types is that they reside in your drawing. You have to physically add the code to the text file. There is a list routine that I have that actually extracts the line type to a text file to kind of help automate that process. All right, so storm drain. It's right there. So there's our line type that we just created. So you can always go back, say, hey, that wasn't quite how I wanted it, and then you can change variables. If you do name it the same thing, it will be redefined. So that would be basically the same thing as editing it. And it does remember your settings from that last line type we created. So we could come back in here, change the text height to 0.2.
Can you use characters on that? On the line type itself?
Yeah, so what I did was this SD is a character string.
Any characters?
Yeah, you can use any character in here. You can use a little hat symbol. You can do dash, you can do equal, you can do anything that you want as long as it's a character. Can you do a railroad? Yeah, sure. Give me a week to develop it and get it right. So you can do whatever you want there. So that's just that's a very useful one, yes. So that's definitely a list that can kind of help you out if you do need to create a line type and you just want one real simple, real quick, and you don't want to have to go in and edit the text file. That's just a quick way of doing it. A couple other ones that I wanted to highlight here are change space copy. So you guys have the change space command to put objects from paper space into model space or vice versa. This will actually copy the objects before you do that command. So it won't take them from paper space and put them in model space. It'll make a copy of it and put it in model space. The other command that I particularly like is this VP outline. What that does is it draws a polyline around your viewport in paper space and puts that into model space. So if you want to see exactly where your sheet falls in your model space, that's an easy way to create that. So that's a very helpful one if you're trying to set up your sheets. Questions? There probably was. I don't know where NV5 had it, and I doubt you did either. Does anybody know where the NV5 one is?
It's in the utility, under utilities.
NV5 utilities. Okay. Well, there's a simple list routine for it.
The other one though is that when you hit it, you'll select the viewport. It just does your entire project. So it'll do every single tab. This
one doesn't do that. This one's a lot friendlier to use, in my opinion. So, as we develop, or as I develop list routines, they're going to appear in the San Diego folder to kind of help segregate them from the 700 plus list routines that are in our default folder. Something else you'll notice is my naming convention. I'll kind of tell you what it does or what category it is, and then the name of what it is or what it does. It's just kind of, you guys can look at those a little bit. A couple things I wanted to touch on. Get rid of this guy. What? So there have been a couple updates to the SDGE tools and blocks. You'll notice everything's dimensioned in both feet and inches. A lot of times the standards kind of switch on us. So everything will have double dimensions, both feet and inches. You'll also notice under, I think I got my template open here. I've redefined all the parts that we use for our SDGE parts and pipe networks. What you'll notice is almost everything is grayed out except for the frame height. So only the frame height is a variable, the rest is a constant, which is actually quite a pain to do when you talk about structures. But so this way it just eliminates a lot of user error. You can only really add this one specific part, and it's going to be with this variable. So those have been completely reworked. The other thing I kind of wanted to look at is when you do your pipe crossings for your profile and your trenching, these have been reworked to be more easily accessible. They're all going to be labeled pipe crossing and then the utility, which that it is. And what we also have here is an assumed and potholed style. So the assumed will be to the 10th place on the elevation, and it will also say assumed. I know a lot of times we want to distinguish that and keep our pothole data separate from the things that we're assumed. So we now have styles that will help us do that, so we can label them appropriately. Something I wanted to talk about a little bit, I was going to show a sample, but we'll just kind of talk about it. Civil 3D is great in that it can automate a lot of processes and design for us. However, what I really want to make an emphasis and encourage you to do is to check what Civil 3D is doing for you. Don't assume that it's doing it correctly. Run a simple check to make sure that it is. And there's a lot of different applications for this. A lot of blocks come in automatically. A lot of parts for your pipe networks come in. Verify that that's the right part and the right size that you're intending to use. That's why when you saw that SDGE vault structure, that there's dimensions associated with it, so that you can quickly verify that, hey, this is the right part, this is the part that I want to use. But this goes beyond just simple parts and stuff like that. It goes to grading as well. So one of the things that I experienced about 2 months ago was I had a very steep access road, which is pretty typical of our SDGE site work. So I had about a 25% access road, and I had a corridor associated with it, and that corridor was going to build a 2-to-1 slope off of that access road. Well, I expected that slope to be 2-to-1, right? Because after all, that's what I told the corridor to do, build a 2-to-1 slope. However, that 2-to-1 slope is only calculated perpendicular to your corridor, meaning on a steep street, that slope is actually going to be 1.8 to 1. Because the way that it calculates that slope, it's a perpendicular section, and your contours are not perpendicular to your road. They're at a skew. So don't trust that the software is going to just spit out the right answer every time. There's a reason why there's a user behind the software. You need to kind of verify and check things that it's designing how you're intending to design. So fortunately for the thing that I was working on, we could make that adjustment pretty easily and not have much conflict. But that could have really devastating effects if you're talking large slopes with retaining walls and everything else. So just be aware that you need to verify what you're doing, and there's easy ways to do that. So one of the ways that you saw is, hey, let's add a dimension to the part. On a slope, hey, let's throw a quick slope label on the surface that we're generating. You know, if we'd done that, it would have shown 1.8% or 1.8 to 1, and you can adjust accordingly. So just do little simple checks like that can really save your design. So make sure you do that. The other thing that I want to encourage you to check is centerline stationing of junction structures, manholes, and vaults. Make sure that the station listed in any label is the actually correct station. So just kind of verify that as well. You know, you don't have to verify every single one on your drawing, but make sure, you know, if you're labeling, let's say, a certain junction structure, you know, at A7 or something, check it once and make sure that it's labeling it correctly. You don't have to go through all of them, but check that first one and make sure that that station is correct. Next thing I wanted to kind of show real quick is I got this request from somebody, I don't even remember who, but how do you explode a feature line when that feature line has a curve associated with it? So we'll go through that practice real quick. So we'll draw a feature line. And we'll give it some elevations because that's fun. And we'll throw an arc in. Alright, so there's a simple feature line. Now let's say I wanted to extract that as a polyline. Well, you know, if I didn't know anything, I'd just go in and explode it. Except now we have all these little segments on our feature line. So that obviously doesn't work. Drop it to 0. Alright. So how would you drop it to 0? Would you go into Elevation Editor and edit all these? That could flatten doesn't work? Well, we'll try it. So we'll flatten it. Flatten will take a while. And we still have the segments. So this is kind of the shortcut and clever way of doing it. Under your prospector, under sites, here would be the regular site that we have all the objects on. What I'm going to do real quick is just create a site called flatten. Whatever. Under 3D geometry, instead of having it use the elevation, flatten to elevation and set that elevation to 0. Then hit OK. So I just created a site. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that feature line to that new flattened site. to deselect that one. I'm going to select that one that's on this site and just move it away. Now when I explode that feature line, it comes as a polyline. So now it's a true polyline. So that's a quick and easy way to kind of extract your line work from feature lines. I know some of us work with feature lines quite a bit, so this can be pretty useful. The other way of doing it is you could actually go in here and physically edit all your elevations to 0 and then explode it. What? I haven't actually tried that, but I'm not seeing it. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Let me close that window. So convert 3D to 2D polyline. It's not a 3D polyline. It's a civil 3D object. Feature line. So it won't even select it. So this was the only workaround that I was able to find, is to put it on a site that's flattened to elevation 0. So keep that in mind for when you're working with feature lines. Next thing I wanted to show is just a quick little variable that may be helpful every once in a while. A lot of times we offset our lines quite a bit. In particular, if we want to offset like a daylight line to do like a limits, ultimate limits line. Scale is all screwed up. So that's kind of, I think I did an offset of 20. However, you notice if I wanted this to actually be a true offset of 20, my offsetting that line gives actually more area than 20 feet. So there's a variable called Offsetgaptype, and you can change this variable to do different behaviors on that feature line. So right now the default is 0, and what that does is it will offset the two lines and fillet it with basically a radius of 0. However, we can change this variable. Let's put it to 1. So what 1 does is it fillets with a radius equal to the offset distance. So now when I offset my 20 feet, you can see what it did there. So that's my new line. So now it's at actually a 20-foot offset from every point on that object that we offset. Can be useful. The other thing you can do with that offset gap variable, or gap type, if you hit 2, what 2 does is it chamfers the object. So instead of putting a radius, it's going to put a line. So just kind of keep that variable in mind. It can kind of save you some time if you're looking at offsetting some daylight lines. So that's offset gap type. So I'll set it back to 0.
Is that only for feature lines?
That's for polylines. Polylines, just polylines really, because you can't offset feature lines using offset command. Don't think so. I'm almost certain it won't. Yeah, because it's already.
It's already a spline, but it's gonna offset it as a.
I'm not even sure what it's doing there because it's adding. It is adding vertexes, but it's behaving weirdly. So yeah, I would not use that on splines. I don't like splines in general, but sometimes they are required. All right. Oh, they'll draw them all day long. A couple things I wanted to talk about just in terms of drafting real quick. To edit block attributes, we use block attributes quite a bit, and a lot of times our block attributes can be rather complex within our block. We'll have several attributes, and it'll bring up this dialog box, and then we'll have to enter through to find the attribute that we want to edit. Rather than doing all that, if you hold down Ctrl and double-click the attribute that you want to edit, it will behave as text. so you can edit it like text rather than have to go through the edit attribute dialog box. You can just Control double click and it will behave like text, and you can edit it on the fly. The same thing goes with layout tabs. I think, Robert, you mentioned this, that you can Control and double click and change the name of a layout tab rather than having to switch to that tab or right click, rename. It just makes things a lot easier to hold down Control and double click.
The other thing that you can do is Sheet Set Manager. You can have Sheet Set Manager control the tab names.
You can also have Sheet Set Manager control your sheet numbers and a lot of different things. We will have a lunch and learn about Sheet Set Manager here shortly, and using fields to kind of populate some of that data that's controlled by Sheet Set Manager.
The person who kind of mastered that a little bit is Anna. If you ever want to get a tutorial, she'll show you what she did on
Melrose.
On that, we were changing sheet numbers almost daily, and it was not a hard thing. It basically took her about 10 minutes to change the entire sheet set numbering system.
On 150
on
sheets
180 sheets.
Yeah.
Okay, and basically, she just went through and boom, it's done.
So we will talk about that in here, just because it's an important workflow that we need to discuss. Your sheet number should not be a block attribute to your text on your title block. It should actually be a field that gets populated using your sheet set. So just kind of a side note. A couple tips and tricks and tips kind of that Robert kind of brought up. One thing that we may want to disable on everybody's computer, depending on how you guys feel about it, is what happens when you double-click on a viewport. You go to Viewport Max, it takes over your whole screen. Is there anybody here that actually uses that?
No.
No. How many of us find it annoying and disruptive?
I don't know how to get out of it.
You can always get out of it by just going back to your paper space. So if you... And this is the problem with it, is it takes a long time if you have a very complex model, like I do in this sheet that I'm working in. So you could hang up your system for 30 seconds there. And how do you get out of it? Just PS.
Oh, okay.
That closes it.
Escape also.
Escape. So there is a way to disable that. I am going to show you real quick, but if you would like to disable that, I would say just come ask me to do it for you. I will try to incorporate it in my next update. I think I can do that. I'm not sure if I want to yet. But so the way that we would actually disable it is a double-click action. We'd create a new double-click action. We'd call it viewport. Might help if you spell it correctly, because it is important. And the object name is a viewport. And then we're going to associate a command with this action. So that's how you actually disable it. I'm telling it to any double click on a viewport will just do a cancel action. It will override the VP Max command. It doesn't work. I tried undefining it. It doesn't work. I think it has, so now if I double click, nothing happens because it's just using a cancel command. So that's kind of a useful utility to do. Yeah, I tried to undefine, and because the command for it is actually _.vpmax, and wouldn't undefine. I don't know why. Yeah. So that's something that may be helpful. The next thing that's
Can you change that to make a not viewport instead?
Yes. But it wouldn't toggle it.
No, just turn it off. I want to toggle it.
I don't know if you can, because it's a modify of the property that you touch. I don't know if there's a command to do that natively. You could write a macro to do it. We could write a macro to do that, but so something that's another thing that might be helpful to you guys is to pan orthogonally. If you enter the pan mode and then you hold down the shift key, you're now panning in an orthogonal fashion. Just be careful using that command because you can easily enter 3D orbit using your mouse button. So be very careful when using that command, but it is there. I wanted to share that with everybody.
You can also draw lines, like start a line for shift.
Yeah, shift can be used to do a number of things with ortho. The one downside is you do have to enter the pan command before you hit shift. If you hit shift and P, it doesn't do anything. So you have to actually physically enter the pan command. Oh, this mouse isn't set up correctly, but you have to actually be in the pan command and then hold shift down. Just keep that in mind.
Doesn't dash pan command, doesn't that do the same thing? I think it works in Viewport. Take dash pan in Viewport.
Check. Oh, that zeroed it out. No, dash pan doesn't work.
Well,
Yeah.
there's some command that actually does. I've used it before.
No, if you think of it, let us know. But pan and then shift, that works pretty well. Upcoming developments that I'm going to be working on, a couple things. Point markers for our points. I will be working on those here shortly. Right now they're very generic. They don't actually represent the object. They're drawn at some random scale. So I will get around to fixing those, and I will be drawing those point marker blocks to the actual real-world dimensions. And from that, then we can size them up as needed depending on your drawing scale. I realize that, yeah, sometimes if I draw an 8-inch water valve as 8 inches, you're not going to be able to see that on the 40 scale. But if I draw it at 8 inches and then we talk, hey, let's add an exaggeration factor to certain things. So that's how we're going to kind of tackle that. Everything is going to be drawn to real world, and we'll exaggerate based on however you want them to display. Until that time comes, you may say, hey, I don't want any of these symbols. Just give me a basic X, and I'll deal with the symbols in another way. You can do that. There is a point description key code set for just all basic X's as your point markers. So under your points, description key sets, there is a description key set with everything set to just the basic X as your marker and not using the blocks as your markers. So if you're importing a large set of points and you just want everything to come as an X, this is the key set that you would use to do that, as the basic X markers. So just keep that in mind. You also see that there's one here for Semper Gas. For those who are going to be working in the gas division, there is a key set for the gas codes. One of the other things that I've been working on is the next update that I push out is going to be quite substantial. And one of the things that it will include is backing up some of your user AutoCAD variables. So every time you run the update, what it's going to do is it's going to throw a folder in your G drive folder under backup, AutoCAD, Civil 3D 2013. It's going to put the date that you last ran it on, and then it's going to back up some of your custom settings, like your CUI, your profiles, and some other things. So if your hard drive ever fries, we don't have to go back and restore it from stock. We can actually go back and restore it from your preset layout, the way that you like setting everything up. So this will occur every time you run my batch update file. It will back up your settings as well. And I'll be looking to kind of expand this a little bit to include more and more of your customization and personalization of things. So just know your settings are being backed up. Along with that, something that I would request that everybody does is a lot of your AutoCAD settings are actually stored in your workspace. Currently, everybody's kind of set, probably everybody's set to a Civil 3D default workspace. We don't really want that because it doesn't tell us anything. So what I would like you guys to do, and hopefully you can take notes on this, I'll send an email out with my next update kind of detailing how to do this. But you want to do two things. First thing is workspace settings. We do want this to automatically save workspace changes. So that's one thing that you want to look at and make sure that it's checked. Then the next big thing is save current as. Now this needs to be typed exactly how I enter it. So it's going to be imperial underscore user custom workspace. So if you're working on the SDGE, maybe you want this to say SDGE. If you're using map, you would say map. But for the most part, I think just about everybody is using imperial profile and imperial way of setting things up. So please do this to your workspace when you get back to your desk, because the next update that I do is going to wipe out a lot of settings, and it's important that you have your workspace saved so that we can bring it in correctly. And also that's something that then we can export and keep track of for you, so that if something happens to your computer, we can restore this workspace. The reason why it needs to be set to this name is that it actually, I'm using it as part of the registry, your computer registry, to set that when you open AutoCAD. So it needs to be that name. It can't be, oh, Jarrod's special workspace. It needs to be imperial underscore user custom workspace. And the very last thing, if you guys can give me 5 minutes. One of the other things that I'm working on is some custom sub-assemblies, custom assemblies for sub-assemblies. So you'll notice we kind of went over some of this. This didn't load all the tabs. Let's see what do we got in here. I don't know if we have any in here. So we have some custom curves that we've developed. The B1, B2, B3 curves. For the medians, we've got all of our G1, G2. We've got all those defined in here. One of the things that I've been working on is really been focusing on the SDGE underground. So we've got some trench sections to go through now. So we have trench sub-assemblies, and what these look like are just your basic trenches with your conduits. Colors don't really come out very well here, but here's your trench. And all these have customized values associated with them. So this is kind of what they look like. I'll probably change it a little bit to get rid of the trench width and trench depth. I'll probably have those as preset values rather than user input. But yeah, go ahead.
What about the conduits?
So the conduits, the way that these work is these are your predefined a 2x2, 2x3, 2x4. We can add more as needed. So that's set. So this first variable that you see here is an output variable. You can't change it. What that is it's the distance between the bottom of your spacer and the bottom of your trench. So that's a calc value that's returned based on some input. These two variables will probably go away. I'll probably just hard code them within the assembly to just kind of take away some user error. So let's say we're not using a 5-inch conduit, we're using a 6-inch conduit. So we'll enter 6. Everything changes accordingly. So if you need a wider trench or a taller trench, all those values adjust accordingly to a table that is predefined within this code. So let's also say we change the separation to 3 inches, which on this spacer detail is represented by a 30. So we'll change it to 30, and everything adjusts accordingly.
I was referring to the conduit tab that you have in there. Your conduit tab.
On these?
No, on the
Oh.
tabs. You have trench, conduit.
Oh, that's conditional.
Conditional.
Oh, okay.
So that's just a conditional sub-assemblies that are pretty specialized, and I don't anticipate too many people getting into them. They are built into some of our NV5's custom routines.
I thought maybe you had some set up for like a complex curve.
So unfortunately, conduits is the one area that has kind of been ignored in Civil 3D. There's not a good way of modeling conduits. Pipe networks are great, but they don't give you the ability to really follow a surface or follow a profile. Each time you do a grade break, it'd be a separate pipe segment. So conduits is kind of this ambiguous hole that Autodesk has not really defined well for us. So the workaround that I'm using right now is I'm building a corridor for these conduits. Yeah, so we can do anything you would like on these conduits. So here's all your different varieties that we can build. We can build, just about anything with any duct size, any separation. They're all there, especially if we lay them flat. Sometimes we need to lay them 8 flat. Obviously we'd need a wider trench to do that. So you can set it wider, or I'll hard code it is what I'll actually do. So transitions happen the same way they would happen within a corridor. It's going to take the last point that you specified on your region and the first point on your next region and kind of connect those 2 dots. So it's not the best application for it, but it's the only way that I know at this point how to model a conduit. So the transitions are still pretty rough, but it will kind of demonstrate. It won't really do your conduits, but it will do your outside trench. It will do that transition correctly. It just won't transition your actual conduits.
Necessarily in the right order.
Yeah, because your transition is going to be different every time. I mean, I could look into that a little bit more if I match up my point codes on my conduits. If we need to get to that detail, we can take it to that detail. What I'm going to say is, at this point in time, we're probably not going to use this functionality to that level of detail, just because the computing resources and time for these corridors to generate is rather extensive. And that's one of the things that you'll notice is that, well, these aren't true circles. They're actually arcs. And if I made this a true circle, I'd have that many more points, and that's that many more points on your corridor, and it's that longer to rebuild. And for this job, this is like a 7-mile trench. So you can imagine the number of points that it's trying to calculate every time something changes. So there's always a fine line of precision versus performance. And in this instance, I'm kind of choosing performance over precision because I don't quite know how we're going to use this technology quite yet, but it's definitely there for us to use. So some of the things that we can do is, obviously it's going to help in your plan view. You're going to see your trench if you have your corridor on. It's going to, if you have a change of section, let's say on this project we actually flatten out to 8 wide, you're going to see that reflected in your corridor model. It will kind of help you double check your crossings with some utilities and other structures, because now you'll actually be able to see the width of your trench changing. And then obviously the next thing we can do is we can create sections of all this stuff. Now what you see here is we've got our trench, but we've also got a pavement repair section as well. So talk 2 seconds about that. So here's your trench pavement repair subassembly. So on this guy, it's located right there. There's your trench pavement repair. So you got your trench width, so we could change this to 4 feet if we so desired. And then we could also change the T section, or left and right, I think, is the variable. Left. So that's kind of the T segment. So we could change that to a foot, just for some exaggeration. We could change the base depth to a foot. Pavement on the right side we'll put as a foot, and then pavement depth, we could change this to 4 inches. So all those things are adjustable. So you have this section now. The one thing I do need to fix on it is I don't have my sub base following the slope of my pavement yet. So that's something I need to work on a little bit. But for the sake of this argument, it works pretty well. So the way this corridor works is we have a profile set at the top of our conduit. So that runs according to our profile. And then the trench will come up in daylight to the existing surface. And then we also have our trench repair that takes this point and this point, and shoots a straight line between the two. So here's what I'm talking about. My base section doesn't quite follow my asphalt. I got to change the way I code it. So you can create all your sections for your entire trench this way. And obviously this is a great tool when you start looking at some crossings and such like that. So here's one, just a random section. This was at like 47, where we actually have a utility crossing within our trench and then also below our trench. So sometimes it can be helpful to kind of just identify those things. Also create all your different cross sections and use them how you desire. You can also go into a 3D orbit on this. However, I would not recommend it on this corridor because this corridor is 7 miles long. But we could very accurately model in a 3D environment certain areas that we were concerned with crossings or other constraints. We could look at that small section and do a 3D model of it.
Jarrod, you said that's a crossing that's more like a longitudinal.
Which one? This one?
Both of them. For that
Both of them?
Wouldn't they be going to the right? Yeah.
So let's look at 47 real quick. 47 should be somewhere here. So we're cutting right here, so you can kind of see that that's that one that's in the trench, and then I think there's one here as well. Yeah, that's a sewer pipe as well. So they kind of do run. So those are the type of things that we've got going on. And just further development that we'll continue to refine. And if you see or have any ideas on tools that you need developed, please let me know. Assemblies are pretty easy to code. They're pretty fast. So if there's something that you need modified, just let me know and we'll develop it here.
We got a quick tip that sometimes when you VPN in, using your 2 screens to come back and some of your screens may look like they're lost. Jarrod helped find that it was a control window.
Control
right will help you find that window that gets lost. Sometimes it'll get lost behind something or hidden, and you can't find it, but yet you're opening the window. Where's my window? You can do any window with the control window left and right and moving the window.
Yeah, so that's the control window button and then arrows to bring whatever current window is open back onto your screen. A lot of times that will happen if you're set up here at work with dual monitors and you go home and you're on a single monitor. All your windows that were on your dual monitor aren't displayed at home, so you need to kind of bring them over using the control window and arrow key. Are there any other user tips? Anything you guys have?
Quick question.
Yeah.
On that corridor you just did, you can split out a report on the floor you take out, how much you take down on the concrete and the asphalt and all that stuff?
We could, yeah. Yeah, we could definitely generate reports from all of our corridors, as long as the material's been defined.
Thank you, Jarrod.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, on a follow-up to Scott.